There could self-evidently be a Labour government 7 days from now. I think people should be aware of what that would mean.
It is important that people realise exactly the threats they face from a Conservative fifth term.
I can't now tell the difference between Conservative and Labour. You have to sometimes cast your vote against the thing you want least rather than for the thing you want most.
Don't sit this election out. There's a very great deal at stake.
Before the last election, we were accused of lies and scaremongering.
This is part of a carefully calculated programme to frighten people this side of the election.
If you vote Labour, you'll get a different label on number 10 Downing Street, but you won't save that teacher's job.
I will only make promises that I can keep.
What they are saying is flatly untrue.
I love Britain. I think it's a great country. The British people are a great country. But we can do better than this.
As we approach the final week of the election campaign, News at 10 will be questioning all three main party leaders live. Tomorrow we talk to Tony Blair, on Friday John Major. But we start tonight with the Liberal Democrats leader Paddy Ashdown. He's with our political editor Michael Brunson at Westminster.
Paddy Ashdown, what do you make of this war book story this evening?
I think it's a pretty desperate throw by the Tories. All parties have a similar book, and you may be absolutely certain that there's one probably several tomes long tucked away in a safe and Conservative central office, and if there isn't, they're not being professional. Look, I'm not interested in war books. I'm much more interested in school books. Now, that's the real issue we should be discussing in this election, and that's what we've been saying today when we said that we will make a commitment to make sure that the literacy problem that Britain has, some of which is connected with the fact that we spend less on school books than any other European nation, is tackled, and we will make sure that double the amount of money spent on school books and equipment in all the schools of our country, and that will mean that no child in Britain will have to go without a school book and have to borrow or use a photocopy and have access to a computer as well. Now, that's the stuff the election should be about, not all this kind of shenanigans.
But in a sense, every party, and including your own, gets up to some tricks in the election, don't they? Call them dirty tricks or call them whatever. Look at the way that you seem to be taking a double standard, if I may say so, on tactical voting. In some places, you are saying, oh, it's us in a two-horse race, and in other places you're plainly making no effort at all so that Labour can get in.
No, that's absolute nonsense. We're fighting every seat and we're fighting it with equal enthusiasm. Of course, every party targets...
But that's surely not true. Some places you're making a huge effort to urge tactical voting.
Michael, every party targets. We will always target our resources. The Labour Party does, the Conservative Party does. What we will never do is target our message. Our message is not trimmed for this class or that class. It encompasses the whole of the country, and I think in that area we're different, and we are determined that we tell the truth in this election. But look, tactical voting, it exists. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it's there. It's one of the reasons people vote. Unhappily, with our present electoral system, it has to exist. You have to sometimes cast your vote against the thing you want least rather than for the thing you want most. Change the electoral system and that would change. And incidentally, all parties do it. I mean, you've talked about the Liberal Democrats, but in Millbank Towers, the great headquarters of the Labour Party, there are phone banks ringing up Liberal Democrat voters. Some of them I know because they've contacted us. Some of our members have been rung 5 times in Conservative Labour marginals, persuading them to vote tactically. And there are Conservative members of Parliament down in the West Country who know they're about to lose their seats to the Liberal Democrats, who are rushing around talking up the Labour vote as hard as they can, because it's the only way they can save their seats. Now, regrettably, with our present electoral system, tactical voting is a fact of life. I want people to vote not just for removing the Tories, or in some cases for keeping Labour out, as in, for instance, the Conservative voters in Rochdale, but I want them also to vote for the only party that offers investment in education and investment in our schools, which the others won't offer.
You see, that's what I don't quite understand, because you started this campaign giving very much the impression of saying, look, don't speculate. You were berating me, actually. Don't speculate on the outcome of the election. Don't sort of talk to me about votes. Just go out there and vote for Liberal Democrats in pure honesty, if you like, because we represent something that's different.
Michael,
and now you're talking about tactical voting.
No, if what is most important for you and your family is to invest in that school, to save that teacher's job, to make sure that your child is not in a class of more than 40, to do something about the crisis in your hospitals, there's only one party that is offering you that choice. If that's what comes first for you, then obviously you vote for the Liberal Democrats, since now it's impossible to tell the difference between the Conservatives and Labour policy. If item number 1 for you and your family is to get rid of the Conservative or to keep Labour out, as is the case in Rochdale, then you'll use your vote tactically. I'm here as the leader of the Liberal Democrats to recommend, surprise, surprise, that people should vote Liberal Democrat, but I understand that they'll have other reasons for voting, and I respect that.
Looking back as this campaign now draws towards its final days, would it be fair for people to say, what's Paddy Ashdown done except be a spoiler in this occasion? You spoilt, for example, the TV debate. You would say, I suppose, it's legitimate, but they would say, that is
Oh, come, 80% of the people of this country, by all the measurements that we have, were in favour of all three party leaders taking place. I mean, look, Kenneth Clarke debated with his two opposite numbers, Gordon Brown and Malcolm Bruce. Michael Howard did the same. What's the Prime Minister frightened of? I mean, you know, the Prime Minister shouldn't be allowed to design a debate that's easiest for him. This is an interrogation by the people of this country of all the three parties. And the Prime Minister mustn't be allowed just to design what's easiest for him.
My point really, I was using that as an example. My point really is that you say you wanted to make the difference, as it were, to go off on completely your own programme, but under, as you say, what you would think of as a rotten voting system, you, in the end up as the sort of irritant between the two parties.
Oh, absolute nonsense. Look, I can't now tell the difference between Conservative and Labour. They've adopted the same spending plans. They won't make any difference to school. If you vote Labour, you'll get a different label on number 10 Downing Street, but you won't save that teacher's job. The only people who offer you that choice are the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much indeed.
And now we have the second of our live interviews with the main party leaders. Tonight, it's the Labour leader, Tony Blair. He's with our political editor, Michael Brunson, at Westminster.
Mr. Blair, weren't you caught out today? You didn't say that there was perhaps a threat or a risk to the basic state pension. You said it is going to be abolished. And that is not true, is it?
It certainly is true. That is the Conservative policy. Now, they say they're going to replace the state pension with private provision. And they say, and people should understand very clearly, this is the danger they should be warned of, they say, the Conservatives, that this will only apply to young people. But if you read the small print, they also say they'll try and bring in older people as the scheme progresses. And what is more, they have given no idea whatever as to how they're going to fund this private pension to replace the state pension.
But you see, this is your view of their plans, isn't
no,
it?
Michael, it's not. With all due respect, it is not my view. There is no doubt about these facts. One, that they intend to replace the state pension with private provision for young people. Two, that young people will then lose their tax relief on pension contributions. Three, they can then bring in older people as and when they want to. Four, that will have an enormous front-end cost, and they've never said where that cost is going to come from.
Let me point to you here. I have it here. This is the Prime Minister's statement from Downing Street when he made this original announcement. The words, "Let me make clear that the state will continue to guarantee that everyone will receive at least their basic state pension uprated at least for inflation."
Yes,
now.
Michael,
are you saying that's a lie, that he's not going to guarantee
they will
it?
guarantee, right?
Yes.
The private pension meets the basic state pension, but the basic state pension is to go, and they have given no indication of where the funding would come from in order to make good that guarantee. Their own costings indicate that the cost of this over the next few decades is £140 billion. They say that some of that will come from removing the tax relief on pension contributions, something in itself that I think a lot of people will find very worrying. And, you know, we went through all this with VAT on fuel before the last election when they made these denials. We went through all this when they denied their intentions towards the National Health Service. And people will remember the poll tax when we went through all this. And we were told this was merely an administrative change in local government. It ended up causing enormous misery and a £14 billion deal. Now, I am not letting the Tories away without proper scrutiny of their proposals for a fifth term.
Well, look,
on tax, on health, on education, where there's grammar school in every town is going to make secondary moderns of all the rest. We deserve to know the answers to these questions.
Well, now let's go back to this thing, because this is another thing that has so angered Mr. Major today. He says you are quite wrong and you are telling a lie when you say that VAT will be put on food. I mean, I put it to you for a start that it seems to me that any government would be crazy to contemplate doing that, but we'll let that go.
Michael,
isn't it fair that the VAT on fuel went on for a very specific reason, a full year after he won the election, because there was a recession and because something had to be done about the huge public borrowing? This is not the actions of a man, and I may say deferred for a year before it was coming. That's not the action of a man who willingly wanted to do it. The circumstances made him do it.
Michael, never mind what he willingly wants or doesn't want. The facts are, the Conservative record is, that they promised in 1979, specifically they would not raise VAT. They raised it from 8 to 15%. Before the last election, we were accused of lies and scaremongering when we said they put VAT on fuel and power. They did it in the budget after the general election. And it is important that people realise exactly the threats they face from a Conservative fifth term. Now, at the same time, today, we have put forward our positive proposals. Our positive proposals on the National Health Service to rebuild it, on reducing class sizes for all 5, 6 and 7-year-olds, on our programme through the windfall tax to get young people off benefit and into work. We've published proposals on small businesses, on how we encourage greater development of small enterprises in our country. But we've put forward the positive, but we're not letting them away without a proper scrutiny of their record and what they would do if they were ever re-elected again.
But what you're really saying, isn't it, that here's the Tory manifesto, all right? You're really saying that's just a pack of lies, the whole thing. It's a whole invention, that you can't trust anything in there.
Well, I don't say you can't trust anything in there, but I'd certainly say this, that if you look at their record, Michael, remember, at the last election, John Major said he'd cut taxes for people every year. He then raised them by the largest amount in peacetime history.
But you know that circumstances change. You know that sometimes the country's doing well, sometimes it's not doing so well. You giving me an assurance that you wouldn't ever want to make those sorts of changes as circumstances change?
I do give you an assurance that I will only make promises that I can keep, which is precisely why we've made a limited set of promises that we can keep.
Can you give a promise, for example, that you wouldn't put up national insurance contributions under any circumstance?
Well, we have already said, Gordon Brown has been very clear, that the policy to remove the ceiling on national insurance contributions has gone as a policy.
Well, that's
but
the
if I can
ceiling,
just
but
take
the
it,
rates.
I know, but look, I'm not going to sit here and write a budget, but
No,
there is
I
nothing.
understand.
The difference between the Labour and Conservatives is that there is nothing in our spending proposals that implies hidden taxes. Every spending proposal is properly costed. Wherever we say we're going to spend money, then we say exactly where it comes from. And one of the reasons why we've had to be so tough on spending is because we're inheriting a situation where the Conservatives have doubled national debt, another broken promise, and where we're going to spend in this country today under Conservative rule. We will spend next year just on interest payments on our national debt more than we spend on law and order and transport put together. Now, we are right to draw attention.
Just a very
to this
quick last
record.
question as we draw this to a close. Your slogan is Britain deserves better. Is it really so terrible out there? Is Sedgefield, for example, such a terrible place that there haven't been some improvements there?
Look, the very thing we're saying, Michael, is that we deserve better. Not that everything's wrong. There are great things about Britain. I love Britain. I think it's a great country. The British people are a great country. But we can do better than this. Better for our schools, for our hospital, for the crime in our streets, for the jobs and industry of our future. Not everything's wrong, but we can do better.
Tony Blair, thank you very much. Back to you, Trevor.
Tonight, the last of our live interviews with the main party leaders, and it's John Major. He's in Downing Street now, and with him, our political editor, Michael Brunson.
Prime Minister, at this time in the last election, Neil Kinnock admitted that he knew he had lost. Do you know where you are at the moment? Do you know whether you have won or lost? Do you know whether you are ahead or behind?
I don't think anyone knows for certain, to be frank. There are two elections being fought. There's the one reads in the newspapers and hears on the media. And then there's what one is finding on the doorstep. And on the doorstep, it seemed very similar to 1992. There are regional variations. In some areas, I think we're doing sharply better than 1992. But broadly, at the moment, it seems pretty much the same. The one difference is I think there are rather more people undecided.
But you don't make any claim at the moment to be ahead.
I don't know who's ahead at the moment. I make no assertion that we're behind either.
Because
I think at the moment there are a lot of people still to make up their mind, and I think if they were going to vote for our opponents, I think they would have made up their mind.
I remember that we spoke after the Wirral South by-election and you said, wake up Britain, because if something doesn't change, we're going to have a Labour government. Do you now concede that there is still, 7 days from now, the possibility of a Labour government?
I think things are changing. I mean, one only has to go out on the doorstep and you can actually feel the change. What I can't be certain of is how far it has changed and how much further it is going to change. But that there is a change, and there has been for some days, I think is now beyond doubt.
But you're still prepared to say there could be a Labour government 7 days from now?
There could self-evidently be a Labour government 7 days from now. I think people should be aware of what that would mean. I'd like them to be aware of that. If they really wish to change the buoyant economic circumstances that we have at the moment, then voting Labour would certainly do it. So my message to people is, don't sit this election out. There's a very great deal at stake. If you want more choice in education, if you want to enshrine and make sure the welfare state's there for the future, if you want to keep low mortgage rates, low inflation and low interest rates, then stick with the government, because that is what we're delivering. And as a result, we have the most buoyant and promising economic circumstances that we have seen for a very long time.
Now, you've identified Europe as the #1 issue in this campaign. It certainly is coming up on the doorsteps, as I've found out for myself. But people are coupling it with saying, Europe, yes, I'm very dissatisfied over the whole problem of more power from Brussels, as they put it, but I'm equally dissatisfied with the complete lack of leadership that the Prime Minister has shown and the splits in his party.
Well, there are two elements. That's perfectly true. The first element is whether or not there should be a federal Europe. By a federal Europe, I mean more powers over employment, social affairs, actually being handed to Brussels. Complete unanimity in the Conservative Party about that. We will not go down the route to a federal Europe. We simply will not do it. There's a feeling out there in the country that this country is being dragged inexorably too far into Europe, further than is good for this country's self-interest. I share that view, and I don't propose to go in that direction. The Labour Party and the Liberal Democratic Party would. The second issue is the much later issue of whether or not we should join a single currency.
Yeah.
Now, in that, there are divisions in my party, that is true. Equally, there are divisions in the Labour Party.
Well, nothing like the same extent.
Oh, no, but with respect, Michael, I'm not sure that's true. They've just had a pamphlet published a few weeks ago with 50 of their candidates openly saying that they are opposed to a single currency.
50.
But that's 50 who actually put their name to a pamphlet.
Yes, but can
At the
you
moment, the
imagine
Labour Party
before?
are actually keeping quiet on this serious debate. We are at least having a mature debate in the Conservative Party on the most important monetary issue that any parliament and any government has had to face for generations.
But, Prime Minister, can you recall an occasion when a political party has gone to the country with a third of its candidates in defiance of official policy within the party?
I think if you look at this very election, does one seriously think that the Labour candidates are in favour of what the Labour leadership says on privatisation? Of course they are not. At the moment, nobody knows, as far as a single currency is concerned, who will enter it, when it will begin, what the circumstances will be, what the conditions will be, or what I will be able to negotiate. Now, it is at that stage that we will make a decision. But it won't be the government that make the final decision. Even if at that stage it was decided it was right to go in, and then Parliament decided it was right, there would be a referendum of every adult in the country on the specific question of whether we should go into a single currency. Right. I think this is of such importance. It would mean such a change to what happens in this country that this is not a decision that the government should make. It's a decision that should be put specifically to the people in a referendum.
All right,
and if we ever got to that, it would be.
Let's move on, if we may, quickly to just one other point, the pensions row that's been going on. Do you not accept that part of the responsibility for this is putting out a highly complicated scheme so close to an election that people simply can't get their brains round the full detail, and that therefore there is a legitimate concern among people to say, look, I don't understand, this is much too complicated, the chances are this is a pig in a poke?
Well, frankly, Michael, no, I don't. Because when we published this some time ago, there was a widespread approval for it right across the political spectrum and amongst every informed observer who actually looked at it. There were none of these suggestions then that the state retirement pension was in danger. The Labour Party didn't suggest that then. Nobody did. This is part of a carefully prepared, carefully calculated programme in order to frighten people this side of the election into believing that the state retirement pension is at risk. Now, I say two things to you, Michael, categorically. The first is the state retirement pension is not at risk, not now, not tomorrow, not in 10 years' time, not in 40 years' time. The Labour Party know that, and yet they state the reverse.
Well, they say to move to a market system.
What they are saying about the state retirement pension is flatly untrue. Everybody who has examined our plans knows that what we are doing is making sure that the pensions will be there in the future and at a higher level than now, not abolition. And they know that is the case. What they say is untrue.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.